All right, we should be live on all the platforms. I'm using Rumble Studio, so that's always a gamble. Sorry, I support Rumble. I love Rumble, but fix your product. It drives me crazy. There's so many elements to it. But I still want to support independent producers, things like that. So we're giving this a shot. Today is going to be a little bit different. It's been a struggle lately. All these lawyers are busy doing everything, and then a couple of them are Jewish, and we have Jewish holiday season right now, so kind of a thin crowd. Today's show will probably be about a 30-minute show, and in my personal life, I have a yellow jacket problem inside of my bathroom upstairs that I have to deal with too. So as soon as I leave here, I'm probably going to Home Depot and trying to figure out how the hell to conquer yellow jackets that have gone into the bathroom of my 1895 house. So, but to introduce everybody, on the top right, this is Alison Morrow. Most of you should be familiar with Alison. Alison used to be my partner on News with Booze, which turned into Laid Back News. Now it's Laid Back Law, where you're watching now. But Alison is coming around to talk about her case with her lawyer in the bottom left. That's Pete Serrano. Pete Serrano is not only a mayor in Washington State, but he's also running for attorney general. Oh, and the bottom right is Florida man. So how's everybody doing?
I was just checking which Jewish holiday was. It's Simchas Torah in a week, and right now it's Sukkot. I knew that. I should be building a sukkah.
I don't even know.
Eric,
I can't even say.
I had to grab this. I don't want to show my address, but I have this EpiPen because now I'm allergic to yellow jackets all of a sudden. So I have to carry an EpiPen with me everywhere I go. It's just an allergy that just started. And I was interviewing a guy after getting stung the second time here in Florida, and my hand was swelling up like a baseball glove on the show. So we were doing live check-ins on, breathing. Was I still alive? Was he going to take over? But that was how committed I was to getting that live stream finished.
Well, congratulations on the live stream. My wife is also allergic to them, so she's freaking out. Oh. She got an overexposure, I guess, too many stings, but kind of makes you wonder what is in the environment that's making this happen. It really does. But let's go ahead and jump forward. Alison, I think you and I met in 2020, and I knew at the time that you had a job with the state in Washington, and you were always kind of concerned. You were keeping everything on the QT. Whenever we worked together, you're saying, I never want to mention anything about my job. I have to keep my work life and my online life separate. And we're incredibly conscientious about this. And I just wanted to put that out there because I think it may be relevant to your case at hand, that you kept your work life separate from your online life to the point where it was verboten. We wouldn't even say that you had another job or even what kind of work you did. So there was no confusion with that. I worked in the corporate world. I didn't talk about my day job other than saying I had a day job. But what's going on now? I see that you have a lawsuit going. Yeah. Tell us all about it.
Well, Eric, remember when you reached out to have me on your show, I had done that video about covering Antifa in Seattle, and it went totally viral. And I got 1 million views in 5 days, and I was getting like 15,000 new subscribers every day. And then YouTube totally shut down the video. You couldn't even find it if you Googled the exact name. And that was my first dip into the world of online censorship. And I would tell people, this was before COVID, I would tell people this happened to me, people who wrote books on how to become a professional YouTuber. And here I was, this ex-TV reporter. I didn't know anything about this world, but I was just watching how it played out in my own experience. And they didn't believe me. They're like, that's not what YouTube does. These tech platforms they don't manipulate content. They don't suppress content. And I could just tell there's no way that what happened to my video. I mean, it just took a nosedive after 5 days. It was in a black hole. You couldn't find it. So that got me really interested in this world of censorship. And then when the COVID pandemic hit, I really saw that ramp up. And in addition to it, I saw how my old industry of television news and mainstream media was ramping that up too. They were sort of, running interference for the government. They were applauding censorship. And so I wanted to both tell people what it was like working in broadcast news. Do we really know what we're talking about? Do we have the time to even know what we're talking about? So kind of pull the curtain back and show people what it's like being in journalism nowadays. But then also to do my own journalism work and find out whose voices were being suppressed and then give them the opportunity to speak for themselves. Were they really what the media was saying about them? Were they really spreading misinformation? Do they have something that could have saved lives in the books they've written or the websites they've published? And so I got into that, and I've interviewed so many of the really big names of the frontline type doctors, people who have amassed, millions of followers at this point. But at the time, they were just a doctor that got suspended from a hospital for misinformation, or a doctor that kicked off of the internet for misinformation. So fast forward, I interviewed Dr. Aaron Cariotti, and this was in September of 2021. He was the medical ethics director at UC Irvine, and he was filing a lawsuit so that he would not have to take the COVID vaccine. He was citing natural immunity and said he didn't need the COVID vaccine, so he was suing over the mandate. It was a very non-controversial, I thought, interview at the time. It's a medical ethics director talking about medical ethics. Of course, YouTube decided it was too controversial to be online, so they took it down. I went to Twitter. This is what we had to do right back at the time, still do. Go to Twitter, try to get YouTube's attention. I'm sure both of you guys, David and Eric, were there retweeting, saying, hey, YouTube, take a look at what happened to Alison's channel. YouTube reinstated the video. They let me back into my channel, so I was able to operate again. My bosses at the Department of Natural Resources saw that, and they said, hey, you can't interview people like this guy. And you can't, in fact, interview anybody like him. Like all the doctors and scientists you've had on, like you can't interview any of them. They said undermining our vaccine mandate. So to keep your job, even though they knew I was doing journalism in my personal time when they hired me, and they encouraged me to do so, when they decided they didn't like the content, then they told me I wasn't allowed to do that anymore.
Was this plural? Was this plural bosses or a singular boss?
Well, I had two direct managers that were having these phone calls with me. And then there's a chief of staff over them, which they were telling me this was coming from the top. And then there's the commissioner of public lands, who basically is working directly with the chief of staff. So there are 4 people named in the lawsuit. All 4 had direct knowledge, I believe, of what was going on. The 2 that were talking to me directly, I'm not sure if they came up with this on their own. They told me that this was a directive that was coming from higher. But I don't know, other than the fact that these 2 people specifically that were, calling me on the phone and telling me that I had to stop. So I explained to them that I was doing this on my personal time, that I use my personal equipment, and that I had a First Amendment right to discuss topics of public concern, and that I was going to continue doing that. I had no problem abiding by the policy of doing this on my personal time with my personal equipment. I told them I had no problem continuing to do that. But what I was not going to change was the nature of the content. I was not going to stop interviewing doctors and scientists. And so they said, okay, well, that's basically it. They ran out the clock on my employment to the day of the vaccine mandate, which was odd. They decided to let me go, they said, with the group of unvaccinated. And I asked multiple times why, if I was being terminated over social media. They said you would have been fired then anyway, because I chose not to get the COVID vaccine. That's all stuff that'll get brought up in the lawsuit too. But I have several emails that are exhibits in the lawsuit that say you were not fired over the vaccine mandate. You were fired over inappropriate use of social media.
Okay, so Pete, I'd love to turn it over to you, since I'm guessing that you probably wrote up the lawsuit. How did you learn about this? What inspired you to get involved? I understand you work with an organization. And then, by the way, David, jump in and ask legal questions because I'm an idiot.
So, hey, we're all idiots. So we've got that in common, and I think Green Day would call us American idiots, and wear that one proudly, right?
Including them.
I love this country, and that's really what brought me to Alison. So 3 years ago, mid-COVID, I founded a nonprofit organization called Silent Majority Foundation. So this is something that we've been working on. We worked on challenging COVID shots. We've fought a handful of Second Amendment issues here in Washington State, ranging from what they call large capacity magazines to assault weapon bans. And when Allison and I were introduced, we started talking, I don't know, about what, a year and a half ago, Allison,
Yeah, about a year ago.
about what happened to her. And, we had this kind of dialogue there. I've got a team of 5 attorneys, so several of us were on a call with her. And, initially it was, is this worth it? Is it the right option? And so we started exploring what she had in her emails from her history. As she mentioned, there's a whole correspondence package, if you will, between her and the management of Department of Natural Resources, certainly her direct manager and a couple of other folks who are even higher up. And it was very clear that they were seeking to censor her ability to speak out, specifically through YouTube and other social media channels on her own time and on her own on her own dime. And so, she's utilizing her own production equipment. She's taking her, evenings, she's taking her weekends out interviewing these doctors. And it's very clear that the intent here was to regulate speech in a way that if you had a dissenting opinion, and I saw a question in the comment of who decides what's misinformation, and clearly in this case is the government, right? So the government has deemed what speech is appropriate. Now, we do know there are very limited circumstances in which the government can stamp on your free speech, and that's when there's, imminent incitement of violence. And obviously that was not the case of Allison. She was putting out, informative videos of a contrary opinion to what the government wanted to espouse. And so this threat of free thinking is not something where the government has any leeway to trample her free speech. And so as we discussed this over time, I worked with my team, I worked with Allison, and we started to culminate the documents, and we said, there's really something here, at least from our perspective, that they infringed her First Amendment rights, not only her free speech, but freedom of press, freedom to associate. And then we've got a 14th Amendment claim because there's a question of, whether or not she was miscategorized and should have received protections as a state employee. They claim she's at will. They claim she was exempt from the civil service requirements and rules. We did a dive into that, and Department of Natural Resources is claiming like 95% of their people don't fall under the civil service category, which if you're, right. I see the faces.
Well, but Washington is, I was looking that up when you were talking, it's an at-will state. So in theory, they can fire an employee for any reason whatsoever, unless it's firing them for exercising a protected right or other unlawful reasons.
Yeah. And so in this case, you broke up there. I caught the first half and the last half. So it is an at-will state, but go ahead.
Oh, no, that's it. It's an at-will state, but they can't fire someone for protected reasons or unlawful reasons or exercising civil rights.
Absolutely. And so, whether or not they miscategorized her, there's this whole notion that regardless, the activity she was undertaking at the time is a protected activity. It's constitutionally protected, both under Washington Constitution and federal Constitution, obviously under the First Amendment. And so under these circumstances, it really reeked of the government saying, we're going to control the narrative. If you step outside of the box that we want to paint you into, you're gone. And so that's where we decided, in talking with Allison and reviewing the information, we believe there's merit to the case. And, when Silent Majority Foundation takes a case, sadly, a lot of folks, we're not able to help everyone, right? Small organization, small budget. But we look at this one and we say, man, if we can really stop the government from trying to trample people's exercise of free rights especially outside of the 9-to-5 workday, we absolutely have to stand for this. And so, Allison's been super courageous in sharing her story and very open about it. And I think it's been very helpful.
Question for you, and clear up my language because I may be. It sounds like they're stupid, and I don't know how to explain it, but correct me if I'm wrong. If it's an at-will state, could they not have just said, you know what, we've decided that we can't budget this position any more than 2 weeks from now, so we're eliminating that position. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Never given her no reason whatsoever other than, you know what, we decided we don't want that position.
Well, let's walk back to what Alison said earlier. They married her termination date with those who rejected the vaccine, right? They could have simply said, you didn't fill out your form, we're terminating you for this, and the whole free speech issue would have been gone, and she would have been placed in a bucket with some, I think, 53 other Department of Natural Resource employees who have looked to and may have even actually sued Miss France, the elected official, the Public Lands Commissioner, for enforcing a vaccine mandate. So they could have easily bulked her into everybody else, especially when they admitted they married her termination date with that. It really would have been phenomenal top cover for them, to be honest. Not that it would have been okay, and not that they wouldn't have gotten sued, but they could have easily rolled her into the vax termination category. Yet they didn't, and expressly stated it was for this purpose.
It sounds personal.
Eric, real fast, you know who I have in part to thank, other than my husband, who is a Marine, a sergeant in the Marine Corps, who's like keep records on everything, is Robert Barnes, because I was communicating with him throughout all of this, and he was like, write this back and get him to admit it in writing. So I did. I like just want clarification, and yeah, they wrote it all out. Stop undermining the mandate and amplifying voices that undermine the mandate. And like I remember sending it to Robert and being like, okay, now what do I do? So.
Wow. Okay. It just seems. And now again, I'm interjecting my opinion, but it seems like everybody is drunk with power and their own virtuous outrage or whatever they had, that they were just trying to punish you personally. It does feel personal.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've litigated several of the COVID vaccine cases, several of the other issues. We've got a Dr. Renata Moon we're representing for speaking out at Ron Johnson's hearing, and we've sued Washington State University for, them not liking what she said about the lack of information on COVID, any negative effects from the shot. And this is a pediatric doctor, right? It's consistent. I will tell you this. It is consistent across the board in the state of Washington that these individuals, whether it's department heads or whether it's coming from the governor's office or wherever it's coming from, it was applied very consistently that thou shalt not speak untruths, right? And once someone stepped outside of the box of the quote, into the misinformation box, they're at risk. I mean, I'm defending 4 doctors, where my organization is presently, who prescribed or advocated for ivermectin, who are at risk. And some of these doctors have practiced 50 plus years with no or very little disciplinary history. Nothing significant, of course, and their licenses are at risk.
It's in the Western District of Washington. That entire state, from what I understand, is a political hellscape. Asking for a jury, but what is the? I don't know if there's a better district or a worse district in that state as a whole.
Well, I mean, so we only have 2 federal court districts, Eastern and Western. There's Western split into Seattle and Tacoma, given where Department of Natural Resources is in Olympia. Really, the option is, try to seek a diversity and go to Eastern. And there are like 3 active judges there, and one has been an absolute nightmare. The other one's been solid, or at least moderately solid. We've had some decent decisions out of some of the Western folks. The other option was to bring it in state court and kind of remove some of the claims and file it in Thurston County, which is where Olympia is. And a lot of those judges come from the Attorney General's office and then cycle into the black robe. So we felt like that was our best opportunity. And quite frankly, the Ninth Circuit, I know we call it the Ninth Circus, is actually improving. I'm not going to say it's a great circuit. If we have to appeal it, I think our chances there are probably as good, if not maybe even better, than hitting success at the Court of Appeals. But quite frankly, we're looking at, if we got to run this to a Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, I think, is a better spot than in Olympia at the so-called Temple of Justice, or many of us call it Temple of Injustice, where our Supreme Court sits.
Pete, is anybody...
be 2 cases of yours, Alison, that are or twice that you're somehow tied to something going to the Supreme Court? I'm sorry, David.
Yeah.
I was going to say that Pete, when I close my eyes, your voice sounds exactly like DeSantis. Yeah, you've gotten that before.
Ah,
I mean, it's uncanny.
I had someone tell me on the campaign trail, and I'm like, geez, I've gained a heck of a lot of weight. I think Ron would be pissed if they heard that commonality. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, I guess that first question from Eric was more to Alison about the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it's funny how that Aaron Cariotti interview turned into such a life changer for both of us. So that interview that was originally flagged by my bosses at DNR then became part of the Missouri v. Biden case, which went all the way to the Supreme Court, arguing that the government, the Biden administration, was unconstitutionally pressuring the tech companies to censor speech, basically turning the tech companies into an arm of the government. So that was fascinating to watch. And then, now it's part of my lawsuit. So it was.
Can this be roped in together? I'm just curious, and I'm asking Pete, David, whatever, that you have literally a same interview. The case has gone to the Supreme Court, and it's government interference, through the tech companies on one. Well, she was working for the government on the state level too. So they seem similar. I don't know. I'm just a citizen.
Guys, I got to duck out. I'm sorry it had to be very short today because I got to get ready for 12:30. Pete, you're coming on for an interview, right? Alison committed to you already, or committed you to me already.
I forgot to tell him, Pete, can you do David's show? It's huge.
Yeah.
He's got a huge audience.
No, I got
just text or email me when and where.
Yes.
Absolutely. I got a lot of questions. You're running for AG of the state, which is itself, phenomenal. And we'll talk about the lawsuit. But I'm not starting the Exodus. Everybody, sorry, I have to duck out.
Bye.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh no! What? Now we're back to uneven.
I know. This is a pet peeve of Rumble Studio. I try to change it to duo, and then it just knocks one of them out. And it's just anyway. Someday,
Yeah.
Rumble. Someday. Anyway,
So,
okay. Back to my crazy wild question.
Thread, I just want to suggest. I don't know how much we'll rely on how that particular interview was used, in prior Supreme Court case. But certainly because that is really the impetus for her termination, that's going to play a very, very heavy role. And I think there's no question that we at least raise the parallel and we raise, hey, flag it for an issue of, hey, especially as we go throughout the appeals process, if that's where we end up going. I think that we're going to flag it for the Supreme Court of, don't forget, you guys actually relied on this, and although they kind of dodged that one. But anyway, it'll be down the road where we'll touch on it.
Okay, now I was listening a little bit to your interview with Alison, I think yesterday, the day before, but I think it was mentioned that there's not only the First Amendment, but also the 14th Amendment, and maybe something else. Can you explain, what is the basis for this, and why, for people like me who want to learn constitutional?
So again, I think the First Amendment element is pretty clear, and we've spent a good bit of time talking about that. But that has to do with their freedom of speech, her freedom of association, and obviously being someone who is getting out press information, the free press element. The 14th Amendment element is a little more nuanced. And again, that goes back to the question of what type of employee was she and what type of rights should have been afforded in a pre-termination and post-termination. There's what's called a Loudermill hearing, which is where an individual is on the chopping blocks or has been terminated and has the opportunity to really come back and have representation to dispute all the allegations associated with a termination. In this case, she would have been able to represent either herself or with a lawyer or with the union. Hey, you fired me improperly. You didn't give me the right notice. You didn't give me a chance to explain myself, all those sorts of things. And that's where the 14th Amendment claim comes in, is that we do believe, in fact, she was warranted right to counsel and opportunity to defend her position and really fight for her job, as opposed to getting an email and saying, get out. And obviously it's not that simple, but I think that's the simplest terms to put it in. But I mean, the reality is this case rests largely, if not almost entirely, on balance on whether or not First Amendment protections are afforded. Because if, in fact, the judge or the jury determines that First Amendment protections aren't afforded, the 14th Amendment claim obviously is really largely based on their termination of her improperly.
Okay, so it's almost a backup or secondary.
Yeah, it's like it's a second level claim. Let's call it that.
Okay.
I mean, it certainly could stand on its own, but again, if for whatever reason, and I don't foresee this, there were deemed no First Amendment protections, it would make the 14th Amendment challenge much significantly harder. Because they would say, well, there were no protections afforded, and we did give her, we would be able to whittle away at how they terminated her, but again, it wouldn't be as strong because, again, the substance of why she was terminated would be gone.
Okay, Allison, I want to get any commentary or anything in from you. I know we're running short on time, and I always end my general interviews with this question, but I'll try it with you. What is the one question I should have asked you, but I didn't?
Oh, geez. I used to ask people that too every time I did an interview when I was in TV news. Now I deserve it. It's karma. Why did you decide to sue? Why it's been a really long process deciding whether to do this. I didn't have to. And honestly, for a while, I wasn't sure I really wanted to. It has been told to me, people tell me they're like gray hair after lawsuits, just this process of extreme drudgery. But there were two reasons I finally decided to go for it. One is the state that we are in with our constitutional liberties. I just think that the First Amendment is so important to every other constitutional liberty. I mean, if you can't talk about your rights, then what can you do? I think that's like what makes America different, or at least it was supposed to be what made us different. And there is just this war on the Constitution right now. And frankly, the amount of hysteria I see among journalists about the state of our democracy and the threat to democracy. I mean, we just hear it all the time. And yet, where are they standing up for the right of people to speak? They have been some of the loudest voices for censorship and for attacks on the First Amendment. I can't even believe how many I've seen recently talking about how dangerous the First Amendment is and how we need to go back and look at the First Amendment. And it really, kind of like they say about the Second Amendment, well, they didn't really mean it this way. They didn't mean it this way. And, we're overdoing it. So if my case sets some kind of precedent that at least say like the employees at DNR that are still there, many of whom I have stayed in contact with, and they frankly feel like this was chilling for them, right? So if they feel like they can speak their minds on their own time without fear of retaliation, great. If more people across the country can use my case as precedent, if it just backs off the government a little bit from chiseling away at our right to speak and just reversing, I think, this trend thinking that the government even gives us the right to speak. It's like, no, the Constitution protects our God-given right to speak. The government doesn't give us our right to speak. We're not like, oh, thank you, government, for letting me speak. That's not how it works. So just pushing back on that. But then secondly, I decided I'm really fascinated by this whole process of going to court and pushing back on this encroachment of government, the government's encroachment on our civil liberties. And I've interviewed countless people about their process, and I wanted to see what it was like for myself. I mean,
are you going to document this?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't like formally started like compiling a movie or anything, but that is kind of my goal. It would be to, keep a journal and keep a video journal too. And then at the end of all this, while also, as the process is going, like, this is what I had to do today. This is what I'm going to do tomorrow. Just showing what this process is really like, because I'm in kind of a unique position. I have both the opportunity to go to court and see how this whole process works, but I also have my own media outlet. And I have you guys, my friends in alternative media, the mainstream media has not been as interested in this case, probably not shocking to everybody, but I have this opportunity to share with people. A lot of folks who are in my position, they're waiting on someone else to invite them on a show and tell their story. But I can tell my own story. I have my own audience and I have the ability to shoot and edit. That's what I did for a living for a really long time. I've won 2 Emmys along with several other awards. I know how to do all that. I know how to put this together. So I just decided, why not take the opportunity to see it for myself? That's what I loved about being in broadcast journalism. I got to go on the front lines of history and see how this all went down and tell people what I saw. And so it gives me the opportunity to kind of do that in my own life. So I'm looking forward to that too. Some people might think I'm crazy, but.
Well, one other question on that. Is it true that your former boss or one of them is or will be running for governor of the state of Washington? And perhaps this could be a bit of a warning to the public of what may happen if the individual's in power?
She was running for governor. Pete, would you like to explain what happened in that?
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
Yeah, I'll touch on that just in case you didn't follow. So she was running for governor, but midway through the primary, she stepped out and ran for the 6th congressional district in Washington. She lost her primary to another Democrat. So I'm guessing at this point, she's kind of just hanging out because she wasn't able to timely declare for the Public Lands Commissioner again. So the assumption is, I'm sure she'll find something to float into in January, but it won't be an elected position.
Shame.
Yeah, I know it broke my heart.
Okay.
We just got to get a clean sweep across the board.
Awesome. Well, both of you, thank you so much. Now, Alison, I put down a link in the description if anybody wants to donate to your Gifts and Go. What is that about?
What is it for?
Yeah, just so everybody knows the purpose.
Well, so yeah, it's givesandgo.com/Alison Free Speech Fight. And it's to pay for travel back and forth to Washington, hotels, childcare. I'll have to take some time off of my podcast in order to focus on the lawsuit at certain points during the journey. So I won't be able to make money during those weeks and not sure totally what to expect. So it's just to help with the added costs of, not feeling like I have to be juggling these, the podcast work, social media work. I also have a farm channel. We have a farm. So I have all these animals I have to take care of. I have 2 kids. I'm a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling a preschooler, and I have a 2-year-old, and then the lawsuit now. So it's just like, hey, if there's a week or several weeks where I have to say, you know what, I got to take some time off of work so I can do this. You know how it is, Eric, when you take time off work, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't get paid. So just stuff like that. And then the Silent Majority Foundation, also, you can donate to them too for their legal work. And Pete, what's the best way for them to do that? It's silentmajorityfoundation.org/WestoverVDNR, I think, right? Or donate.
That will take you right to the case. There's a donate button there. There's also a general donate button that goes to the general fund on the front page of silentmajorityfoundation.org.
Yeah, and just to clarify, the reason it's Westover VDNR is my full name is Alison Morrow Westover. So it's been kind of confusing because I used Alison Morrow in television. That's my middle name. That carried into the online world. And now it's like, surprise, my real last name is Westover. So anyway, that's why it's Westover VDNR.
Fair enough. Now, Pete, where can people learn about you and your race? I mean, this is national, but there are people in Washington State who may be interested and can help get the word out for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, just touching back, for anyone wanting to learn about Silent Majority Foundation, silentmajorityfoundation.org, or if you want to go the shortcut route, smfjb.org is our shortcut that takes you to the page. For my race for Attorney General in Washington, I'm sure anyone that's from Washington knows that their ballots, they've either received their ballots or they're required to receive them by today. So I will be the top position for the Attorney General race, Pete Serrano. You can follow me on any social media, whether it's X or Instagram or Facebook. Serrano, Serrano 4AG, and that's spelled out Serrano FORAG. Same thing for the website, serrano4ag.com. But I would say this, my X has gotten pretty fun and a little bit spicy. We've gone out and talked to some really interesting homeless folks in Spokane and in Seattle. We've got some videos where I wasn't quite sure if I was going to make it home if I got too much closer to someone. I mean, it's a war zone in certain parts of our state, and it's terrifying. And if we don't get this, public safety under control, we're going nowhere.
I would love to talk to you sometime, if possible. I have other channels on, especially the drug problem in Washington State. I don't know if it's improving or not, and I get confused between Washington and Oregon. You guys seem to be racing to the bottom, in my opinion, for addict deaths. But I was wondering if you'd ever be available to talk about what can be done and where the laws could be tweaked to, maybe help out with I don't know what you call it, fentanyl crisis, or just a drug crisis, or what. Yeah,
it's primarily fentanyl, and we're hearing that there's a Fentrank right now is a big drug, which is fentanyl mixed with horse tranquilizer. I had a gentleman show me his leg where the skin was being eaten, and this was one of the most impactful statements I've had over my entire race of the past year. He said, if it's doing this to the external parts of my body, what do you think it's doing to the insides? And I'm like, dude, you're the drug addict. What do you think I'm thinking as you're saying this, right? And of course, he's ready to go take another hit. So yeah, there's a lot. I would happily share that information, and I've got some really intense and solid videos that really kind of, a lot of folks understand that there's a homeless industrial complex that's benefiting from this. And I mean, I don't want to take away from the shine here on Allison and her.
No. I mean, this is just a future, but I just wanted to.
I mean, it's hard to not get off on a tangent and continue going on the problems that we have to fix. We got to fix it this year, and there is a ripe opportunity here in Washington. I wouldn't waste my time away from my family running for this office if I didn't think it was achievable. But yeah, I do want to say one thing, Allison, as you document, you mentioned yesterday in our podcast, you thought you would be a nightmare once we filed. How do you feel today?
Yeah, I'm surprised how much less stress there is after making the decision. I think it was a lot harder to go forward, to make the decision to do it, than it has been so far to actually file and walk through this. And we'll see what happens. Like, I've never been through discovery before, deposition, whatnot. But I remember, Pete, you asked me, like, when we were talking before we made the decision, it's deposition. It can be tough. You have to tell your story. And that stuff is so easy for me. I mean, that's the stuff that I've been doing my whole life. So that doesn't bother me, like having to talk about it or think. It's just, just kind of some of the busy work, I think, it was a little overwhelming. Like they could ask for all these things that then you have to spend 6 weeks and overnight looking for. And you guys helped me realize that, maybe some of those fears were overblown. But now, I slept fine. The last few nights since this was filed, I thought I was going to be up just like biting my nails for the next 2 years. And I'm not. So I don't know. I guess I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay so far. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And obviously, I wish you, the most luck possible. Free speech is huge to me. One of the most important things. It's my entire survival, actually. So, I mean, anybody who's watching this, if you like watching YouTube and you like creators, this is important. I mean, this doesn't only affect somebody like Allison on one side or another. It affects if you're on the left, if you're on the right. I mean, it affects everyone. If we don't have free speech, we don't have shows. We don't have programs. We're just dead in the water. And then I guess you could watch AI, because that's about all that'll be out there. I'm going to wrap up for today just to let everybody know next week I will attempt to have a show, but I'm not sure if it'll happen. This may be delayed till November 1st because, again, Jewish holidays and all kinds of collisions. I think November 1st, a lot of people are coming back and are able to settle back in. I just want to let people know that. Please comment below. Please share this out. Help Allison get the word out. And I definitely will be trying to talk to Pete later on one of my channels somehow to get this in, because I am very concerned and interested in I'd almost call it a national experiment going on in the Northwest of the United States. And while I'm a bit of a libertarian, I think there has to be a measured response because we also don't want people to die. So until next time, everyone, thank you so much and see you soon.